In the 1950s, Grandma made melt-in-your-mouth suppers that mattered. Her work in the kitchen didn't just fill bowls. She made perfect tender dinners that melted on your tongue. Poppy seed chicken, chicken Divan, and salmon wiggle. Every supper was so soft you barely had to chew. These suppers might sound old-fashioned today, but they brought comfort to every table. Let's rediscover these 30 forgotten melt-in-your-mouth suppers that disappeared. Poppy seed, chicken with Ritz cracker. Topping became the most popular church potluck dish in the 1970s because it was creamy, tender, and everyone asked for the recipe. Churches served it at every single gathering. Mothers cooked chicken breasts until tender. They shredded the meat into bite-sized pieces. They spread the chicken in a greased casserole dish. They mixed sour cream and cream of chicken soup together. They poured the creamy mixture over the chicken. They crushed Ritz crackers with their hands. They melted butter in a bowl. They mixed the crushed crackers with melted butter and poppy seeds. They sprinkled the mixture on top. They baked it at 350 degrees for 30 minutes. The cracker topping turned golden and buttery. The chicken stayed incredibly moist under the sauce. The poppy seeds added a nutty crunch. The secret was using sour cream mixed with soup. Sour cream made the sauce extra creamy and tangy. Soup alone was too thick. The combination created the perfect texture. Chicken Divan with broccoli and hollandaise became the fancy dinner mothers served when company came because it looked elegant but was secretly easy to make. Guests thought mothers spent hours cooking. Mothers laid cooked broccoli spears in a buttered baking dish. They placed sliced cooked chicken over the broccoli. They made hollandaise sauce from a packet mix. They poured the sauce over the chicken and broccoli. They sprinkled breadcrumbs and grated Parmesan on top. They baked it at 375 degrees for 25 minutes. The sauce bubbled around the edges. The top turned golden brown. The chicken was tender and moist. The broccoli stayed soft but not mushy. The hollandaise sauce was rich and buttery. The secret was using packet hollandaise instead of making it from scratch. Homemade hollandaise broke easily and was difficult. Packet mix worked perfectly every time. The sauce stayed smooth and creamy. Nobody could tell it came from a packet. Mothers smiled and accepted compliments. Before we move on, many of you asked in the comments where to find these recipes. We even received tons of email too, so we published these recipes on our website. The link is in the description. Let's continue. Nana's ugly chicken casserole became the family favorite everyone requested, despite its terrible name, because it tasted incredible even though it looked messy. Grandchildren called it ugly, but ate 3 helpings. Nana mixed cooked shredded chicken with cream of chicken soup. She added sour cream to make it extra creamy. She stirred in frozen mixed vegetables. She poured the mixture into a casserole dish. She topped it with crushed potato chips. She baked it at 350 degrees for 30 minutes. The potato chips turned golden and crunchy. The casserole bubbled underneath. The chicken was so tender it fell apart. The vegetables were soft and flavorful. The creamy sauce held everything together. The secret was using both soup and sour cream together. Soup alone made it too thick. Sour cream alone made it too thin. Together they created the perfect creamy texture. The potato chip topping added the crunch. Kids loved that part most. The ugly name made it memorable. Families still request it today. Before we move on, church supper, hot dish, became the Midwest potluck staple every family made because it fed 20 people for under $5. Churches served it every single week. Mothers browned ground beef with diced onions. They drained the fat completely. They mixed the beef with cooked egg noodles. They added cream of mushroom soup straight from the can. They stirred in frozen corn and green beans. They poured everything into a large baking dish. They topped it with crushed cornflakes mixed with melted butter. They baked it at 350 degrees for 40 minutes. The cornflake topping turned crispy and golden. The casserole was hot and bubbling underneath. The beef was tender and flavorful. The noodles were soft and creamy. The vegetables added color and texture. The secret was not adding water to the soup. Undiluted soup kept the casserole thick and creamy. Diluted soup made it watery. The cornflake topping was traditional in Minnesota. Every church lady used cornflakes. It became the signature of Midwest hot dishes. Salmon, wiggle with white sauce, became the Friday night favorite Catholic families made because fish was required, and this recipe was cheap and delicious. Kids actually ate fish without complaining. Mothers opened 2 cans of pink salmon. They drained the liquid and removed bones. They flaked the salmon with a fork. They made white sauce by melting butter in a pan. They whisked in flour until smooth. They slowly added milk while whisking constantly. The sauce thickened beautifully. They added the flaked salmon to the white sauce. They stirred in frozen peas. They heated everything through gently. They served it over soft white toast. The salmon was tender and mild. The white sauce was creamy and smooth. The peas added sweetness and color. The toast soaked up the sauce. The secret was making real white sauce instead of using canned soup. Real white sauce tasted fresh and light. Canned soup was too heavy and thick. The delicate sauce let the salmon flavor shine through. Kids loved it because it wasn't fishy. 5. Melt-in-your-mouth suppers. Poppy seed chicken, chicken Divan, Nana's ugly chicken, church supper. Hot dish, salmon wiggle, each so tender you barely chewed. Every dish cost under $2. Every recipe used cream sauces. Every casserole fed families. Every bite melted on your tongue. Shipwreck, casserole with layers, became the one-dish wonder mothers made when they had no time because everything just got layered in a pan and baked. No pre-cooking required at all. Mothers greased a deep casserole dish. They layered uncooked white rice on the bottom. Then they added a layer of raw ground beef crumbles. They added sliced onions on top of the beef. They added diced celery and sliced carrots. They poured 2 cans of tomato soup over everything. They added 2 soup cans of water. They covered the dish tightly with foil. They baked it at 350 degrees for 2 full hours. Everything cooked together perfectly. The rice absorbed all the liquid. The beef became tender and flavorful. The vegetables were soft and sweet. The tomato created a delicious sauce. The secret was the long, slow baking time. 2 hours let everything cook through completely. The layers melted together into one delicious dish. The name came from the messy layers that looked like a shipwreck, but it tasted amazing. Spoon bread with creamed corn became the southern side dish that was so soft you ate it with a spoon instead of a fork. It was part cornbread and part pudding. Mothers opened 2 cans of creamed corn. They poured the corn into a mixing bowl. They added cornmeal and stirred it in. They added beaten eggs and melted butter. They poured in whole milk. They added baking powder and salt. They whisked everything until smooth. They poured the batter into a greased baking dish. They baked it at 375 degrees for 45 minutes. The top turned golden brown. The inside stayed soft and custardy. It puffed up like a soufflé. They scooped it with a spoon onto plates. It was warm and comforting. The corn flavor was sweet and mild. The texture was softer than cornbread. The secret was using creamed corn instead of whole kernel corn. Creamed corn made it smooth and pudding-like. Whole kernel corn made it chunky and dry. Spoon bread melted in your mouth. Creamed peas and onions in white sauce became the Easter side dish every family served because it was elegant, simple, and tasted like spring. Holiday tables always had it. Mothers boiled frozen pearl onions until tender. They boiled frozen peas until just cooked. They drained both completely. They made white sauce in a saucepan. They melted butter and whisked in flour. They slowly added milk while whisking constantly. The sauce thickened and turned smooth. They added the peas and onions to the sauce. They stirred gently to coat everything. They seasoned with salt, white pepper, and nutmeg. Just a pinch of nutmeg added warmth. They served it in a nice serving bowl. The peas were bright green and sweet. The onions were soft and mild. The white sauce was creamy and velvety. The secret was using pearl onions instead of chopped onions. Pearl onions looked elegant and stayed whole. Chopped onions disappeared into the sauce. The nutmeg was traditional in white sauce. It added a subtle flavor nobody could identify, but everyone loved. Soft egg. Noodles with cottage cheese became the budget supper mothers made when money was tight because noodles and cottage cheese cost almost nothing. It fed the whole family for pennies. Mothers boiled wide egg noodles until very soft. They drained them but didn't rinse them. They returned the hot noodles to the pot. They added a large container of cottage cheese. They stirred until the cheese melted into the hot noodles. They added butter and black pepper. They stirred everything together gently. They served it hot in bowls. The noodles were soft and slippery. The cottage cheese melted into a creamy sauce. The butter added richness. The pepper added flavor. Kids ate it plain. Adults added more pepper. The secret was not rinsing the noodles after draining. The starch on the noodles helped the cottage cheese stick. Rinsed noodles were too slippery. The cottage cheese slid off. The starchy noodles created a creamy coating. This simple dish was pure comfort. It cost less than $1 total. Marie Blanch. Casserole became the mysterious church lady recipe everyone wanted because nobody knew what was in it, but it tasted incredible. The name sounded French and fancy. Church ladies mixed cooked chicken with cream of mushroom soup. They added cream of chicken soup, too. They stirred in sour cream and mayonnaise. The mixture was incredibly rich and creamy. They added cooked rice to stretch the chicken. They poured everything into a casserole dish. They topped it with crushed Ritz crackers and melted butter. They baked it at 350 degrees for 30 minutes. The topping turned golden and crispy. The casserole was creamy and smooth underneath. The chicken was so tender it fell apart. The two soups together created deep flavor. The sour cream added tang. The mayonnaise added richness. The secret was using 4 different creamy ingredients together. Most recipes used 1 or 2. Marie Blanch used 4. That made it the creamiest casserole ever. Church ladies guarded this recipe fiercely. They only shared it with close friends. 10 melt-in-your-mouth suppers, from poppy seed chicken to Marie Blanch casserole, each so tender and creamy. Every dish cost under $2. Every recipe used clever tricks. Every casserole fed families completely. Every bite was soft, smooth, and delicious. Every family ate them weekly. Salmon croquettes with white sauce became the Friday night tradition Catholic families ate because the church required fish, and these crispy patties were delicious instead of boring. Kids actually looked forward to Fridays. Mothers opened 2 cans of pink salmon. They drained the liquid completely. They removed all the bones and skin carefully. They flaked the salmon into a large bowl with a fork. They added crushed saltine crackers to bind everything together. They cracked 2 eggs into the bowl. They added diced onion and a pinch of black pepper. They mixed everything with their hands until it held together. They shaped the mixture into flat patties about 3 inches wide. They heated oil in a cast-iron skillet on medium heat. They carefully placed the patties in the hot oil. They fried them for 4 minutes on each side. The outside turned golden brown and crispy. The inside stayed moist and flaky. While the croquettes fried, mothers made white sauce. They melted butter in a saucepan. They whisked in flour until smooth. They slowly added milk while whisking constantly, and the sauce thickened into a smooth, creamy consistency. They seasoned it with salt and white pepper. They served the hot croquettes on plates. They ladled the white sauce over the top. Families ate them with mashed potatoes and green beans. The croquettes were crispy outside and tender inside. The white sauce added creaminess. The secret was using saltine crackers instead of breadcrumbs. Saltines made the patties lighter and fluffier. Breadcrumbs made them dense and heavy. The crackers absorbed moisture but stayed tender. The white sauce covered any fishy flavor. Kids ate every bite without complaining about fish. Cheesy cabbage, casserole with cracker topping, became the way mothers got kids to eat cabbage because the cheese sauce disguised the vegetable completely. Kids had no idea they were eating cabbage. Mothers chopped one head of green cabbage into bite-sized pieces. They boiled the cabbage in salted water for 8 minutes. The cabbage softened but didn't turn mushy. They drained it completely in a colander. They made cheese sauce in a saucepan. They melted butter and whisked in flour. They added milk slowly while whisking. The sauce thickened. They added 2 cups of shredded cheddar cheese. They stirred until the cheese melted completely. The sauce turned smooth and golden. They mixed the drained cabbage with the cheese sauce. They poured everything into a greased casserole dish. They crushed Ritz crackers with their hands. They mixed the crumbs with melted butter. They sprinkled the buttery crumbs over the cabbage. They baked it at 350 degrees for 30 minutes. The topping turned golden and crispy. The cheese sauce bubbled around the edges. The cabbage was soft and mild. The cheese sauce was rich and creamy. The cracker topping added crunch. The secret was boiling the cabbage first before baking. Raw cabbage released too much water during baking. Pre-boiled cabbage was already tender. The cheese sauce clung to every piece. Kids ate it thinking it was mac and cheese with vegetables. Mothers smiled and said nothing. Cabbage became a family favorite. Nobody complained. The casserole disappeared completely every single time. Mothers made it twice a week during cabbage season. Squash casserole with breadcrumbs became the southern summer staple mothers made when gardens overflowed with yellow squash and zucchini. Neighbors traded squash recipes constantly. Mothers sliced yellow squash into thin rounds. They boiled the squash in salted water for 5 minutes. The squash softened quickly. They drained it completely and pressed out excess water. They mixed the squash with sour cream and cream of chicken soup. They added diced onion and shredded cheddar cheese. They cracked 2 eggs into the mixture. They stirred everything together gently. They poured the mixture into a buttered casserole dish. They made topping by mixing breadcrumbs with melted butter. They added a pinch of garlic powder to the crumbs. They sprinkled the buttery breadcrumbs over the squash mixture. They baked it at 350 degrees for 40 minutes. The top turned golden brown and crispy. The casserole set firmly underneath. The squash was soft and mild. The sour cream made it tangy. The cheese made it rich. The eggs held everything together. The breadcrumb topping added texture. The secret was squeezing out the water after boiling. Squash held a lot of liquid. Too much water made the casserole soupy. Pressing the squash removed excess moisture. The casserole baked thick and creamy instead of watery. The combination of sour cream and soup created perfect consistency. This recipe used up abundant summer squash. Gardens produced more squash than families could eat fresh. The casserole became a creative solution. Church potlucks featured 5 different squash casseroles every week during summer. Carrot casserole with brown sugar became the Thanksgiving side dish that tasted like dessert but counted as a vegetable. Kids ate carrots without any complaints whatsoever. Mothers peeled and sliced 2 pounds of carrots. They boiled the carrots until fork tender. They drained them completely. They mashed the carrots with a potato masher. They didn't need to be perfectly smooth. They added softened butter to the hot carrots. They stirred in brown sugar and a pinch of cinnamon. They cracked 2 eggs into the mixture. They added a splash of vanilla extract. They stirred everything until well combined. They poured the mixture into a greased casserole dish. They made topping by crushing cornflakes. They mixed the crushed cornflakes with melted butter and more brown sugar. They sprinkled the topping over the carrots. They baked it at 350 degrees for 30 minutes. The topping turned golden and crunchy. The carrots were sweet and smooth. The brown sugar caramelized slightly. The cinnamon added warmth. The cornflake topping provided crunch. The secret was adding vanilla extract to the carrots. Vanilla made them taste like sweet potato casserole. The carrots were naturally sweet already. The brown sugar enhanced that sweetness. The combination tasted almost like pumpkin pie filling. Kids thought they were eating dessert. Parents were happy they ate vegetables. The casserole sat next to turkey and dressing at Thanksgiving. It disappeared first. Everyone took seconds. Mothers made double batches. Leftovers were eaten cold, straight from the refrigerator. The sweet flavor was addictive. Families requested it year-round. Chicken Sanoocho became the immigrant grandmother's comfort stew that melted in your mouth because she slow-cooked it for hours until everything was incredibly tender. Grandchildren gathered around her stove every Sunday. Grandmother cut chicken into pieces with the bone in. She placed the chicken in a large pot with water. She added chopped onions, garlic, and cilantro. She added cubed potatoes and yucca root. She added corn on the cob cut into chunks. She added green plantains cut thick. She seasoned everything with salt, pepper, and a pinch of cumin. She brought it to a boil, then reduced to low. She simmered it for 3 full hours. The chicken fell off the bone. The potatoes became so soft they almost dissolved. The yucca was creamy and smooth. The plantains were tender and slightly sweet. The broth was rich and golden. She served it in deep bowls. She squeezed fresh lime juice over each serving. She added chopped cilantro and sliced avocado on top. Families ate it with white rice on the side. The chicken was so tender you could eat it with a spoon. The vegetables melted in your mouth. The broth was flavorful and comforting. The secret was the long, slow cooking time. 3 hours broke down everything completely. Quick-cooked Sanoocho was chewy and tough. Slow-cooked Sanoocho was silky and tender. Grandmother never rushed her cooking. She started early in the morning. By afternoon, the house smelled amazing. Grandchildren arrived hungry and happy. 5 more melt-in-your-mouth suppers, salmon croquettes, cheesy cabbage, squash casserole, carrot casserole, chicken Sanoocho, each so tender and soft. Every dish used clever cooking methods. Every recipe made vegetables delicious. Every casserole fed families completely. Every bite was pure comfort. Creamed dried beef. Over biscuits became the breakfast for dinner favorite soldiers remembered from the military and wanted at home. Veterans called it SOS with nostalgia. Mothers opened a jar of dried chipped beef. The beef was thin-sliced and heavily salted. They rinsed it under cold water for 1 full minute. Rinsing removed excess salt. They tore the beef into bite-sized pieces with their hands. They melted butter in a large skillet over medium heat. They sprinkled flour into the melted butter. They whisked it together until it formed a paste. They cooked the paste for 1 minute. They slowly poured in cold milk while whisking constantly. The mixture thickened into a smooth white sauce. They added the torn beef pieces to the sauce. They stirred everything together. They seasoned with black pepper and a tiny pinch of cayenne. No salt was needed because the beef was already salty. They simmered it on low for 5 minutes. Meanwhile, they baked refrigerated biscuits according to the package directions. The biscuits turned golden brown and fluffy. They split the hot biscuits in half. They placed the bottom halves on plates. They ladled the creamed beef over the biscuits generously. They placed the top halves on the side. Families ate it with forks. The biscuits soaked up the creamy sauce. The beef was salty and flavorful. The white sauce was smooth and rich. The secret was rinsing the beef first. Unrinsed beef made the dish too salty to eat. Rinsed beef had the perfect amount of salt. The white sauce needed to be thick enough to cling to the biscuits. Turkey and noodle bake with peas became the Monday after Thanksgiving tradition every family made because nobody wanted plain turkey sandwiches anymore. This casserole transformed leftovers into something special. Mothers diced leftover turkey into bite-sized pieces. They boiled wide egg noodles until tender. They drained the noodles completely. They mixed the turkey and noodles together in a large bowl. They opened 2 cans of cream of mushroom soup. They stirred the soup into the turkey and noodles. They added frozen peas straight from the freezer. They poured in a cup of turkey gravy, leftover from Thanksgiving. They mixed everything together gently. They poured the mixture into a greased casserole dish. They topped it with French fried onions from a can. They baked it uncovered at 350 degrees for 30 minutes. The onions turned crispy and golden. The casserole bubbled around the edges. The turkey stayed moist and tender. The noodles were soft and creamy. The peas added color and sweetness. The gravy added extra flavor. The secret was using leftover gravy mixed with the soup. Gravy alone wasn't enough liquid. Soup alone was too thick. Together they created the perfect creamy consistency. The French fried onions on top were traditional. They added crunch to the soft casserole. Kids loved them. This casserole cleared out all the Thanksgiving leftovers in one meal. Mothers were grateful. No more turkey sandwiches. Families happily ate this casserole for 3 days straight. It never got boring. The creamy texture made it comfort food. Casserole with saltines became the Christmas Eve tradition coastal families served because oysters were fresh and plentiful during winter holidays. Inland families used canned oysters instead. Mothers drained fresh oysters and reserved the liquid. They crushed saltine crackers into coarse crumbs. They melted butter in a saucepan. They mixed the cracker crumbs with melted butter. They greased a casserole dish. They layered half the buttered crackers on the bottom. They arranged oysters over the crackers in a single layer. They sprinkled salt, pepper, and a tiny bit of mace over the oysters. Mace added a subtle spice. They poured a little oyster liquid over the layer. They repeated the layers. More crackers, more oysters, more seasoning, more liquid. They topped with the remaining buttered crackers. They poured heavy cream over the entire casserole. The cream soaked into the crackers. They baked it at 375 degrees for 30 minutes. The top turned golden brown. The casserole was hot and bubbly. The oysters were tender and delicate. The crackers were soft and buttery. The cream made everything rich. The secret was using fresh oyster liquid mixed with cream. The oyster liquid added briny flavor. Cream alone was too rich. Together they were perfectly balanced. The mace was traditional in oyster casseroles. It complemented the seafood flavor. This dish was considered elegant and special. Families only made it on Christmas Eve. The soft texture made it melt in your mouth. Oyster lovers requested it every year. Green rice casserole became the St. Patrick's Day favorite that was actually just rice with vegetables, but the green color made it festive and fun. Kids loved the bright green appearance. Mothers cooked white rice according to package directions. They let it cool slightly. They chopped fresh parsley until they had 2 full cups. They chopped fresh spinach finely. They mixed the parsley and spinach into the warm rice. The rice turned bright green immediately. They added cream of celery soup to the mixture. They stirred in sour cream. They added shredded cheddar cheese. They cracked 2 eggs into the mixture. They added diced onion and garlic powder. They mixed everything together thoroughly. They poured the green mixture into a greased casserole dish. They topped it with more shredded cheese. They baked it at 350 degrees for 40 minutes. The top turned golden and bubbly. The casserole set firmly. The rice was soft and creamy. The vegetables were tender and mild. The cheese added richness. The sour cream made it tangy. The secret was using both parsley and spinach together. Parsley alone wasn't bright enough. Spinach alone was too strong-flavored. Together they created the perfect green color and mild taste. The eggs held the casserole together. Without eggs, it fell apart. The cream of celery soup added moisture without being too heavy. Impossible cheeseburger pie became the magic dinner mothers made because the batter separated into layers by itself and formed its own crust while baking. Kids thought it was actual magic. Mothers browned ground beef with diced onions in a skillet. They seasoned it with salt, pepper, and garlic powder. They drained the fat completely. They spread the beef in a greased pie plate. They sprinkled shredded cheddar cheese over the beef. They made batter in a blender. They added milk, eggs, and biscuit baking mix. They blended it until smooth. They poured the batter over the beef and cheese. The batter was thin and liquid. They placed the pie plate in the oven. They baked it at 400 degrees for 30 minutes. During baking, something magical happened. The batter separated into 3 layers. The bottom formed a crust. The middle stayed custardy. The top turned golden brown. The pie set firmly. They let it cool for 5 minutes before slicing. They cut it into wedges like pizza. The bottom crust was tender and soft. The middle was creamy and rich. The top was golden and slightly crispy. The beef and cheese were hot and flavorful. The secret was using biscuit mix in the batter. Biscuit contained leavening agents that made the batter separate. Regular flour didn't work. 10 more melt-in-your-mouth suppers, from creamed dried beef to impossible cheeseburger pie, each so tender and creamy. Every dish cost under $2, and every recipe used clever tricks. Every casserole fed families completely. Every bite was soft, smooth, and satisfying. Every family loved them. Tuna patties with cracker meal became the Depression-era recipe mothers still made in the 1970s because their grandmothers taught them to never waste food and stretch every dollar. Every ingredient served a purpose and nothing was thrown away. Mothers opened 3 cans of tuna fish from the pantry. They drained the water from each can completely and thoroughly. They emptied the tuna into a large mixing bowl. They flaked the tuna apart with a fork until no chunks remained. They crushed 2 sleeves of saltine crackers into fine crumbs using a rolling pin. They added the cracker crumbs to the flaked tuna. They cracked 3 eggs into the bowl. They added diced onion and a good pinch of black pepper. They mixed everything together with their hands until it held together firmly. The mixture was thick enough to shape. They shaped the mixture into flat patties about 3 inches wide and ½ an inch thick. They heated vegetable oil in a cast-iron skillet over medium heat. They carefully placed the patties into the hot oil. They fried them for 5 minutes on the first side without moving them. The bottom turned golden brown and crispy. They flipped each patty carefully with a spatula. They fried the second side for 5 more minutes. Both sides were golden and crusty. They lifted the patties out and placed them on paper towels to drain excess oil. They served the hot patties on plates with mashed potatoes and coleslaw. Families ate them with ketchup or tartar sauce. The patties were crispy outside and soft inside. The tuna was mild and not fishy at all. The crackers made them tender and light. The eggs held everything together perfectly. The secret was using saltine crackers instead of breadcrumbs or cornmeal. Saltines absorbed moisture but stayed light and fluffy inside the patties. Breadcrumbs made them dense and heavy like hockey pucks. Cornmeal made them gritty and grainy. Saltines created the perfect tender texture. The patties held together during frying but melted in your mouth when you ate them. Grandmothers made these during hard times when money was scarce. 3 cans of tuna stretched to feed 8 people. Chicken spaghetti with Velveeta became the Texas church lady casserole everyone fought over because the processed cheese made it incredibly creamy and smooth. Velveeta was the secret ingredient nobody could identify but everyone loved. Church ladies cooked chicken breasts until tender in boiling water. They let the chicken cool slightly, then shredded it into bite-sized pieces. They reserved 2 cups of the chicken cooking broth for later use. They boiled spaghetti noodles in salted water until tender. They drained the noodles but didn't rinse them. They returned the noodles to the pot. They added the shredded chicken to the noodles. They opened 2 cans of Rotel tomatoes with green chilies. They poured the entire cans into the pot with liquid included. They cut a full block of Velveeta cheese into cubes. They added the cheese cubes to the hot mixture. They poured in the reserved chicken broth. They stirred everything together over low heat. The Velveeta melted completely into a smooth sauce. The tomatoes added tangy flavor and slight heat. They added a can of cream of mushroom soup. They stirred until everything was well combined and creamy. They poured the mixture into a large greased casserole dish. They topped it with crushed tortilla chips. They baked it at 350 degrees for 30 minutes. The top turned golden and the chips got crispy. The casserole bubbled around the edges beautifully. The cheese was smooth and creamy throughout. The chicken was tender and moist. The spaghetti absorbed all the flavors. The Rotel added a little kick of spice. The tortilla chips added crunch on top. The secret was using Velveeta instead of regular cheddar cheese. Regular cheddar separated into oil and curds when baked. It turned grainy and greasy. Velveeta stayed smooth and creamy no matter how long it baked. The processed cheese contained emulsifiers that kept everything together. The cheese sauce coated every strand of spaghetti. The Rotel tomatoes were essential too. They finally revealed the secret ingredient was Velveeta. Everyone was shocked that processed cheese made the best casserole. Beef and cabbage casserole became the Irish-American dinner mothers made when they wanted something hearty, filling, and cheap that fed the whole family. 1 head of cabbage stretched a pound of beef to serve 8 people easily. Mothers browned ground beef in a large skillet with diced onions. They seasoned it generously with salt, black pepper, and garlic powder. They drained all the excess fat from the pan. They chopped 1 large head of green cabbage into bite-sized pieces. They layered half the raw cabbage in the bottom of a large greased casserole dish. They spread the cooked ground beef over the cabbage layer. They layered the remaining raw cabbage on top of the beef. They opened 2 cans of tomato soup. They mixed the soup with 1 cup of water in a bowl. They poured the soup mixture over the entire casserole. The liquid soaked down through all the layers. They covered the dish tightly with aluminum foil. They baked it at 350 degrees for 1 full hour. After an hour, they removed the foil carefully. They sprinkled shredded cheddar cheese over the top. They returned it to the oven uncovered for 15 more minutes. The cheese melted and turned bubbly and golden. The cabbage cooked down and became incredibly soft and tender. The tomato soup created a flavorful sauce throughout. The beef stayed moist and flavorful. Families served it in deep bowls like stew. They ate it with crusty bread for dipping. The cabbage was sweet and mild after long cooking. The beef added heartiness and protein. The tomato sauce tied everything together. The melted cheese on top was the perfect finish. The secret was baking it covered for the full hour. The steam trapped inside cooked the cabbage until it was melt-in-your-mouth tender. Uncovered baking made the cabbage tough and dry. Covered baking made it silky soft. The raw cabbage cooked down to half its original volume. What seemed like too much cabbage reduced to the perfect amount. The tomato soup was better than plain tomato sauce. The soup had seasonings and thickness already mixed in. Plain sauce was too watery. The soup created the ideal consistency. Irish grandmothers brought this recipe from the old country. American mothers adapted it with canned soup and cheese. The combination of Old World and New World ingredients created something special. Baked onion soup. Casserole became the sophisticated side dish mothers served at dinner parties because it looked and tasted fancy, but was secretly just onions and bread. Guests requested the recipe every single time without fail. Mothers sliced 4 large yellow onions into thin rings. They melted butter in a large skillet over medium-low heat. They added all the onion rings to the butter. They cooked the onions slowly for 45 minutes, stirring occasionally. The onions turned golden brown, soft, and caramelized. The kitchen smelled amazing during this process. They made beef broth by mixing bouillon cubes with hot water. They cut French bread into thick slices. They toasted the bread slices in the oven until golden. They greased a casserole dish. They layered toasted bread on the bottom. They spooned caramelized onions over the bread. They sprinkled shredded Swiss cheese over the onions. They repeated the layers until all ingredients were used. Bread, onions, cheese. They poured beef broth over the entire casserole slowly. The bread absorbed the broth like a sponge. They covered the dish with foil. They baked it at 350 degrees for 30 minutes. They removed the foil. They baked it 15 more minutes uncovered. The top turned golden and crusty. The casserole was hot and bubbly throughout. The onions were sweet and soft. The bread was soft inside but crispy on top. The cheese was melted and gooey. The broth made everything moist and flavorful. The secret was caramelizing the onions for the full 45 minutes. Quick-cooked onions were sharp and harsh-tasting. Slow caramelized onions were sweet and mild. The long cooking time transformed the onions completely. Their natural sugars came out and turned golden. They became almost candy-like in sweetness. The Swiss cheese was traditional for onion soup. It melted better than other cheeses. The flavor complemented the sweet onions perfectly. Using beef broth instead of chicken broth added depth. The broth soaked into the bread and created a pudding-like texture. The bread held all the flavors together. This casserole was essentially French onion soup in casserole form. It was easier to serve at dinner parties than soup. Guests could eat it with forks instead of spoons. The presentation was elegant and impressive. Nobody guessed it was just onions and bread. Mushroom leek pasta bake became the elegant vegetarian casserole mothers made when they wanted to impress guests without serving meat. The earthy mushrooms and sweet leeks created restaurant-quality flavor at home. Mothers cleaned fresh mushrooms and sliced them thick. They trimmed leeks and sliced them into rings. They rinsed the leeks thoroughly to remove all sand and dirt. They melted butter in a large skillet. They sautéed the mushrooms and leeks together until soft and golden. The vegetables released their liquid and it evaporated. They cooked penne pasta until al dente in salted boiling water. They drained the pasta but reserved 1 cup of pasta water. They made a cream sauce in a saucepan. They melted butter and whisked in flour until smooth. They slowly added heavy cream while whisking constantly. The sauce thickened into a velvety consistency. They added grated Parmesan cheese to the cream sauce. They stirred until the cheese melted completely. They added a pinch of nutmeg and white pepper for seasoning. They combined the cooked pasta, sautéed vegetables, and cream sauce together. They added splashes of reserved pasta water to make it creamy. They poured everything into a buttered baking dish. They topped it with breadcrumbs mixed with melted butter and more Parmesan. They baked it at 375 degrees for 25 minutes. The top turned golden brown and crispy. The casserole was creamy and bubbling underneath. The mushrooms were tender and meaty. The leeks were sweet and mild. The cream sauce was rich and smooth. The pasta absorbed all the flavors beautifully. The Parmesan added salty, nutty flavor throughout. The breadcrumb topping provided textural contrast. The secret was sautéing the vegetables until all their liquid evaporated. Wet vegetables made the casserole watery and thin. Dry sautéed vegetables concentrated their flavors. The mushrooms became intensely earthy. The leeks became incredibly sweet. Using heavy cream instead of milk made the sauce luxurious. Milk was too thin and didn't coat the pasta. Heavy cream clung to every piece. The nutmeg was subtle but essential. It added a warm, mysterious flavor nobody could identify. The combination of mushrooms and leeks was classic French cooking. American mothers adapted it into a casserole format. The dish was sophisticated enough for company but easy enough for weeknight dinners. Vegetarians appreciated having an elegant option that wasn't just plain vegetables. 5 more melt-in-your-mouth suppers: tuna patties, chicken spaghetti, beef cabbage, baked onion soup, mushroom leek pasta, each so tender and creamy. Every dish used clever cooking methods, every recipe transformed simple ingredients, every casserole fed families completely. Every bite was pure comfort. Bake became the way clever mothers turned leftover cauliflower soup into a completely different dinner that nobody recognized as leftovers. The transformation was magical and delicious. Mothers made cauliflower soup by boiling cauliflower florets until very tender in chicken broth. They pureed the cooked cauliflower with the broth until completely smooth. They added heavy cream and butter to make it rich. They seasoned it with salt, white pepper, and nutmeg. The soup was creamy and velvety. Instead of serving it as soup, they used it as a casserole base. They cooked wide egg noodles until tender and drained them. They mixed the noodles with the cauliflower soup. They added diced cooked chicken breast. They stirred in shredded Gruyere cheese. They poured everything into a buttered casserole dish. They made a topping by mixing panko breadcrumbs with melted butter and grated Parmesan. They sprinkled the topping over the casserole generously. They baked it at 375 degrees for 30 minutes. The top turned golden brown and incredibly crispy. The casserole was creamy and smooth underneath. The cauliflower soup created an amazing sauce. The noodles were soft and coated completely. The chicken added protein and heartiness. The Gruyere melted into strings when served. The panko topping was crunchy and buttery. The secret was pureeing the cauliflower completely smooth. Chunky cauliflower was obvious and kids refused it. Pureed cauliflower disguised itself as cream sauce. Nobody could identify the vegetable. Kids who hated cauliflower ate this casserole happily. The Gruyere cheese was more sophisticated than cheddar. It melted beautifully and had complex flavor. The nutmeg in the soup added warmth. Just a tiny pinch made a huge difference. The panko breadcrumbs were lighter than regular breadcrumbs. They stayed crispier and didn't get soggy. The combination of smooth sauce and crunchy topping was perfect. Every bite had contrasting textures. The casserole was elegant enough for company, but comforting enough for family dinner. Mothers made big batches of cauliflower soup just to turn it into this casserole. The soup was good, the casserole was better. Families requested it specifically. Mothers smiled knowing it was just cauliflower. The vegetable everyone claimed to hate became the star of dinner. Clever cooking transformed everything. Forgotten chicken and rice casserole became the miracle dinner mothers made before leaving for church because it baked itself while the family was gone. They returned home to a ready meal waiting. Mothers greased a large casserole dish in the morning. They poured 2 cups of uncooked long-grain white rice into the dish. They opened 2 cans of cream of mushroom soup. They mixed the soup with 2 cups of water. They poured the soup mixture over the rice. They placed raw chicken pieces on top of the rice. They used bone-in chicken thighs and drumsticks for best flavor. They sprinkled the chicken with onion soup mix from a packet. The dry mix seasoned the chicken perfectly. They covered the dish tightly with heavy-duty aluminum foil. They placed it in a cold oven. They set the oven to 275 degrees. They left for church services that lasted 3 hours. The casserole baked slowly while they were gone. When they returned home, they removed the foil carefully. Steam poured out. The chicken was falling off the bone tender. The rice had absorbed all the liquid perfectly. The soup created a creamy sauce throughout. The onion soup mix flavored everything beautifully. They served it directly from the baking dish. Families ate it with simple vegetables and bread. The chicken was so tender it pulled apart with a fork. The rice was soft and creamy. Every grain was coated with sauce. The mushroom flavor was mild and comforting. The secret was the low temperature and long baking time. High heat made the rice burn and the chicken dry. Low heat cooked everything gently and evenly. Starting in a cold oven was essential. Preheating made the top cook too fast. Cold start meant gradual, even cooking. The heavy-duty foil trapped all the steam inside. The steam cooked the rice perfectly. Regular thin foil tore and let steam escape. The name, forgotten, came from being able to leave it unattended. Mothers forgot about dinner and it cooked itself. They returned to a perfect meal. No stirring or checking was needed. The method was foolproof. Even new cooks succeeded. This recipe saved countless Sunday dinners. Churches across America knew this casserole. Mothers shared the recipe with new brides. Cheese grits. Casserole became the Southern brunch staple that converted Northerners into grits lovers because the creamy cheese disguised the texture completely. Yankees, who claimed to hate grits, asked for seconds. Mothers boiled water with butter and salt in a large pot. They whisked in quick-cooking grits slowly. They stirred constantly to prevent lumps from forming. They cooked the grits for 5 minutes until thick and creamy. They removed the pot from heat. They added sharp cheddar cheese to the hot grits. They stirred until the cheese melted completely into the grits. They cracked 3 eggs into a bowl and beat them well. They added a little of the hot grits to the eggs while whisking. This tempered the eggs so they wouldn't scramble. They added the egg mixture back into the grits. They stirred everything together thoroughly. They added a splash of milk to make it extra creamy. They poured the mixture into a buttered casserole dish. They sprinkled more shredded cheese on top. They baked it at 350 degrees for 45 minutes. The top turned golden brown and slightly puffed. The casserole set firmly like a soufflé. The inside was creamy and smooth. The cheese was melted and gooey throughout. The grits were soft and no longer grainy. The eggs made it light and fluffy. The secret was tempering the eggs before adding them. Eggs added directly to hot grits, scrambled instantly. Tempered eggs incorporated smoothly. The result was like a cheese soufflé. The casserole puffed up beautifully during baking. The cheese needed to be sharp cheddar, not mild. Sharp cheddar had enough flavor to stand out. Mild cheddar disappeared. The grits absorbed flavors like a sponge. They needed strong cheese to taste good. Using quick cooking grits instead of old-fashioned grits saved time. Quick grits cooked in 5 minutes. Old-fashioned grits took 45 minutes. The result tasted exactly the same. The casserole was served at Easter brunch, Christmas breakfast, and Sunday dinners. It was elegant but simple. Southerners grew up eating this. Northerners were skeptical until they tasted it. The creamy cheese texture won everyone over. Grits haters became grits lovers. The casserole proved that preparation mattered more than the ingredient. Properly cooked grits were delicious. Improperly cooked grits were terrible. This recipe was the proper way. Corn pudding soufflé became the Thanksgiving side dish that was part vegetable and part dessert because it was sweet, creamy, and absolutely delicious. Kids begged for it year-round, but only got it on holidays. Mothers opened 2 cans of whole kernel corn and drained them. They opened 2 cans of creamed corn without draining. They mixed both types of corn together in a large bowl. They melted a full stick of butter. They added the melted butter to the corn. They cracked 4 eggs into the bowl. They added a box of Jiffy corn muffin mix. They added a container of sour cream. They added a tablespoon of sugar. They stirred everything together until well combined. The batter was thick but pourable. They poured it into a greased 9 by 13-inch baking dish. They baked it at 350 degrees for 1 hour. The top puffed up like a soufflé. It turned golden brown and slightly cracked. The edges pulled away from the pan. They let it cool for 10 minutes before serving. They cut it into squares. The texture was like soft cornbread mixed with custard. The corn kernels added sweetness. The creamed corn made it smooth. The eggs made it light and fluffy. The sour cream added tang. The corn muffin mix provided structure. The secret was using both whole kernel and creamed corn together. Whole kernel alone was too dry and chunky. Creamed corn alone was too smooth and boring. Together they created perfect texture. The eggs needed to be at room temperature. Cold eggs didn't mix well. Room temperature eggs blended smoothly. The soufflé puffed up best with room temperature eggs. The Jiffy mix was essential. Homemade cornbread mix didn't work the same. Jiffy had the perfect balance of ingredients. The slight sweetness complemented the corn. The dish walked the line between side dish and dessert. Some families ate it as both. At Thanksgiving it sat next to turkey and stuffing, but it tasted sweet enough to be dessert. The texture was softer than cornbread, but firmer than pudding. It melted in your mouth. The combination was unique and addictive. Families fought over the last square. Mothers made 2 pans to avoid arguments. Leftovers were eaten cold, straight from the refrigerator the next day. Baked deviled eggs in cream sauce became the Easter supper tradition that transformed leftover colored Easter eggs into an elegant dinner nobody expected. The transformation was genius and used up all those hard-boiled eggs. Mothers peeled a dozen hard-boiled eggs carefully. They sliced each egg in half lengthwise. They scooped out all the yolks into a bowl. They mashed the yolks with a fork until fine. They added mayonnaise, yellow mustard, and a pinch of salt to the yolks. They mixed everything until smooth and creamy. They spooned the yolk mixture back into the egg white halves. They arranged the stuffed eggs in a buttered casserole dish. They made cream sauce in a saucepan. They melted butter and whisked in flour until smooth. They slowly added milk while whisking constantly. Families ate Nana's ugly chicken casserole 3 times a week and asked for thirds, despite the terrible name. Every supper was so soft and tender you barely had to chew it. Every dish cost less than $2 to make from start to finish. Every recipe used clever cooking tricks that made food incredibly tender and smooth. Grandmothers baked casseroles low and slow until everything melted together perfectly. They added cream sauces that kept meat moist and vegetables soft. They topped dishes with buttery crackers that dissolved on your tongue. These suppers weren't just about easy cooking or saving money at the grocery store. They were about creating food so tender that grandparents with dentures could eat comfortably at the dinner table. They were about making vegetables so soft that picky children ate them without a single complaint. They were about transforming tough, cheap ingredients into restaurant-quality meals that impressed everyone.